If you're new here, this is my series called Tint, where I am attempting to go through all of the movies, games, books, TV shows, animated or otherwise, comics, basically everything from Star Wars that I can get my hands on, I am going through within this year, if that's even humanly possible. I started this back in January, so there are a couple videos already posted going through all 3 phases of the High Republic, so if you want to be fully caught up with this, you can find a playlist of those on my page. Today we're going to be talking about the Acolyte. Because there are so few things in this chunk of time as I'm filming this right now, I originally thought about lumping this in with the end of High Republic Phase 3, but that didn't really feel fair to the Acolyte because it is its own thing. This is happening 100+ years after the end of the High Republic, so it just didn't feel right to me as, spoiler, someone who loves the Acolyte, to kind of hide it in a way with the High Republic. Someone said, I thought, why not lump the 2 videos that I usually post about each section together and just make a slightly longer, or honestly probably about the same length, video. Right now I'm going to cut to my short form review of the Acolyte. Over on TikTok and Instagram, I post these videos as I watch / read / experience these things in real time. So if you've already seen this video or if you just want to skip past it, I'll put the timestamp of where you can jump to on screen, so I'll see you in a second. In my seemingly never-ending quest to go through as much of Star Wars as I possibly can in the year 2026, we have reached the phase on my spreadsheet where I get to talk about the Acolyte. General spoiler warning for everything you see in my hand and also the show. I want to set a quick ground rule here, not that I think you guys need it, but I feel like there's something about this show that calls to the worst people. If you have a genuine thought about these books or the show, I would love to hear it. But if you just want to type something nasty, this is not the place to do it. That being said, let's talk about these in chronological order, starting with the singular The Acolyte kelnacca comic. It is surprisingly difficult to establish a timeline for these things. I'm 52% sure that kelnacca is set before Wayseeker. I don't know if that's true or not, so if you know, feel free to leave it in the comments. This is by Cavan Scott. It follows kelnacca's former Padawan, Yarzion, I hope I said that correctly, as they are on their deathbed speaking to their Padawan named Ordi. The story is framed as this deathbed story that the master is telling to their Padawan about their master and what their life was like together. I thought that this comic was so fun. I've read it 4 times now and I've cried every single time. It feels a little bit weird for me to put things like that in S tier along with like Fallen Star because it's just one singular comic, but I really do love it, so I think that it is going to be an S tier read for me. Next up, we have The Acolyte Wayseeker by Justina Ireland. This is an adult novel about Indira and Vernestra. Vernestra is a Wayseeker at this point, and she keeps being summoned by the council and she keeps ignoring them. The council sends Indira to go get her and bring her back so that they can have a conversation with her and give her this new mission. And she kind of gets stuck with Indira, and through this book we see them working together and get a good idea of where Vernestra is at in her life at this point in time. This book is super short. It's nothing super groundbreaking and not really anything that I think I could recommend at this point. I have read this a couple times and every time I read it I like it a little bit less. There's just a couple things in here that get to be a little bit grating, and while I do love it because it's giving context for a show that I really love, that's about where the love stops. So I think I'm going to put this in a C-D+ category. On the complete other end of that, we have The Acolyte, The Crystal Crown. This is by Tessa Gratton, one of my favorite Star Wars authors, and I love this book. I've also read this one a couple times, and every time I read it, I like it more. You can probably tell by the cover, this book follows Jord and Jecki as they go on a little bit of an adventure together. I do have a full review of this back on my page, but for a very brief TLDR on this plot. With their masters, they end up going to this planet which are holding essentially the Hunger Games without the killing part to determine who the best teen on the planet is. It's not exactly what's happening, but like, that's the gist of it. The winner of this event basically have a fast track to do whatever they want to in adulthood, usually becoming like politicians or leaders in their military or just general leaders in this society. As the masters are convening with this planet's council and trying to get them to integrate with the Republic, Jord and Jecki are invited to participate in this Hunger Games, and while Jord is hesitant at first, they ultimately get thrown into it, and the rest of this book is about them doing the Hunger Games and also some other things things come up that they have to figure out, kind of integrated with these trials. I would argue that this book is mostly about Jackie, which I completely don't have an issue with. We see her less in the show, so I think it makes sense to get a little bit more of her in this book. And also, if I'm being honest, even though I love Jord so much, Jackie is just more interesting than he is. I think that this book is so well written and feels like such a detachment from the acolyte while still being directly connected to it, if that makes any sense. The vibes of this book and the acolyte are completely different. This one feels kind of more like Padawan, the Obi-Wan book, in the way that it's just some teens going on an adventure and ultimately learning something that allows them to become a better Jedi. But one of the reasons I love this book so much is because it really gives a good foundation for seeing them in the show and giving you at least a little bit of an idea what they were like before they were being actively hunted by a crazy person. I can definitely acknowledge that this is a little bit of a biased take. I love these characters, I love this author, I love the acolyte in general. Objectively, is this the best written thing in Star Wars? No. But it is one of my personal favorites, thus it is going in the S tier. It's a few hours later, and I did want to finalize my thoughts for the entirety of The Acolyte here. I just finished watching the show. It is currently extremely close to midnight. For some reason, I decided that I needed to finish all of this within one day. It is kind of a fun experience going through both books and the comic and the show all at once because it's all kind of fresh in your mind. I feel like I don't need to go through every single episode of this show just for me to ultimately tell you that it is one of my favorite things Star Wars has ever done. To me, this show is so quintessentially the essence of Star Wars. It has intrigue and mystery and action and these beautiful scenes and sets and costume designs, and the characters are all intriguing and complex and diverse, and that is, to me, what makes Star Wars such an interesting place to be in. One of the reasons I love this show so much is how it portrays the Jedi as just these people doing their best, and how skewed perceptions can be from different points of views. That angle isn't something we see very often in Star Wars. Always very much you're on the good side or you're on the bad side, and there is no in between that. The way that the show was able to say these characters are Jedi, and while they may be good people, they did a bad thing and they have to live their life like that. I think that this show also really highlighted a part of the Jedi Order that we don't get to see very often, which is the era in time where they were able to become complacent and relaxed within the galaxy because they hadn't been in a large conflict for so long. Very pointedly in this show, the extra Jedi that we see are losers. Like, the only one that we really hear talk is Mog, but just by kind of the vibes of the rest of them, you can tell that they're not like cream of the crop essential Jedi. And I think a reason for that is to show that in this time of peace in the galaxy and in this time of peace within the Order, these characters can just be regular people for the most part. These aren't going to be your warrior Jedis. These are the ones going out and doing field work and community service projects and working in the archives. Every time we see groups of Jedi together, it's because something big and something detrimental is about to happen. See the High Republic and also all of the Clone Wars. We haven't really got to see a point in this vast timeline where the Jedi are just straight chilling out, no one's hunting them, no one is trying to eradicate them as a religious organization. And I think that the attempt here to show that, while it might not have landed for viewers experiencing it for the first time, I feel personally like it landed really well and I get exactly what they were going for. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, so I'll just cap it off by saying that The Acolyte is absolutely one of my favorite things in Star Wars. It is an S+ best of all time for me. I think that there are so many interesting storylines that came out of this show that we could in the future pursue if given the opportunities. There's so many interesting ways that this show could have continued, and I really hate that we're probably not going to see it anytime in the near future because some people decided to be jerks about it. It's not really something that I can control, so I'm choosing to put that thought aside and instead celebrate the fact that I personally think that this show is impeccable and the gold standard for what Jedi-based Star Wars should be. If you have read any of these books or the comic or seen the show, I would love to hear your thoughts about it as long as you are going to be chill. After this, we are moving on to pre-Clone Wars stuff, so think Master and Apprentice, Padawan, Dooku episodes of Tales of the Jedi, and then we have The Phantom Menace, our very first movie in timeline order. I'm so excited to finally get to a movie. If you want to come along for this journey, make sure you press the follow button. Thank you guys so much for being here, and as always, I will see you tomorrow. Bye. Breaking out the tier list and trying not to repeat exactly what I just said verbatim, let's talk about The Acolyte Kelnacca, which is a singular comic by Kevin Scott. I love this comic. I love Kelnacca. I gave it an S. I love that this gave his character more of an emotional backing. And honestly, if I can just speak my truth for a minute, I think that a Wookiee Jedi is just about the coolest thing you can be in Star Wars. And the fact that we don't have that many of them, I think really is a shame. Though for lore reasons, I understand why we don't. If anything, I think this comic was really well done. Kevin Scott writes most of these comics for a reason, and it's because he knows what he's doing. Next chronologically was Wayseeker by Justina Ireland. This book is about Vernestra and Indara. I already explained it, so I'm not going to rehash everything. The more that I think about this book, the more I'm kind of disappointed by it. The first time I read it, I think I really did have my acolyte color glasses on. I really did want to love this book. The second time I read it, I felt a little bit less positively about it. By this most recent time, I was just kind of slogging through it. To give you a little look behind the scenes, I read that book on March 9th. It is currently April 6th, so it has been about a month. To date, I am in the middle of the Clone Wars, so I have experienced a lot of Star Wars since I read this book last month. And as I'm sitting here, I can only really think about the parts of this book that I didn't like, though of course that is not the meter for whether or not this book is good or not, but it is kind of the meter for whether I can say that I like it. I gave it a C-, so it's not like the worst book I've ever read. It's definitely not the worst Star Wars book out there, but this for me doesn't leave the impression I want it to, and therefore I'm inclined to forget about it because I never want to be the person who's only pointing out the negative things in anything, but especially in Star Wars, and especially in this property that I love so much and that I want to do well because I genuinely think we need more of the Acolyte. We'll come back to the soapbox in a second. Next in this little Acolyte chunk, we have The Crystal Crown by Tessa Gratton. I'm not sure if you can see him. You can't. He's up here. Hold on. If there were any more pieces of Yord merch out there, I would own them. But unfortunately, I do think this is it, besides his like build and plate lightsaber that isn't really his saber, but we don't have to get into that right now because it's a product made for children and it's fine. I went into this book knowing that I was going to love it, if for nothing more than because it has these two characters on the cover. I adore Yord Fandar as a Star Wars character. I adore Jackie Lon as a Star Wars character. I think that these two are such perfect examples of what it is like to be a Jedi in this time period where they aren't being threatened, and we can have all of these Jedi who are so drastically different than the Jedi we know from, say, the earlier stages of the High Republic, or to go way further from the Clone Wars. The Jedi in the Acolyte are absolutely nothing like the Jedi that we know, and I think that is a lot of the reason why it got so much hate, but I firmly believe if you sit there and listen to the message that it is trying to send out, you will understand why. It's because they've become complacent. It's because they're having all of these outside influences. It's because the Senate is actively looking to start regulating and controlling them. And all of that has very little to do with the content of this book. So let me actually say why I like it. I think that this book is written extremely well. It is a YA, so it does have a little bit of that like teenager stink on it. As someone who is not a teenager, I cannot say that that is something that I necessarily enjoy in books like this. But as with the middle grades where they're almost exclusively following children, I choose to look past that because I want to give this book a fair chance for what it is. And what this is a really fun story about Jecki and Yord coming into themselves as Jedi Knights and taking these unexpected trials. As mentioned, Tessa Gratton, one of my favorite authors, I think that she did a really, really good job with this book. And I think that the background that this book gave Yord and Jecki only strengthens the character characters that we see them as in The Acolyte. Pretty obviously, I love this book. I gave it an S. And now let's talk about The Acolyte. I could speak in circles about The Acolyte for days, hours, months, years, decades, millennia. So I'm going to try to keep this concise. I probably will end up sounding like I'm ranting, so apologies in advance for that. What I love about this show so much is that we are seeing the Jedi in a completely different light. When we see the Jedi any other time in Star Wars, period, they are always the good guys. They are always doing exclusively the right thing, or what they can justify to be the right thing. And we are always viewing them as the heroes. They are the ones who are there to do the right thing and protect from evil. And I love that this story took the Jedi and took them in this time period where they're not being hunted, they're not being attacked, there's no war going on. We looked at this group whose at its surface is a peacekeeping, force-serving organization and said, what if they did the wrong thing? What would the repercussions of that be? And why would they even be doing the wrong thing to begin with? That concept is so fascinating to me because we've seen Jedi do the wrong thing before. We've seen Jedi kill out of hate. We've seen Anakin Skywalker straight up turn to the dark side. That's obviously him doing a bad thing. But the way that it's framed in this show, where if we were only seeing it from the Jedi's perspective, we, the viewer, would have to look at it and say, they're obviously doing the right thing. Look at how these children are being treated in this witch cult. And the way that we get both perspectives and really truly get to experience the entirety of this story is something that I don't think we ever have gotten. The Acolyte as a series was so different from what we have gotten from Star Wars thus far. But at the same time, it is so rooted in what makes Star Wars so cool. We got one of what I think is the best villains in Star Wars. We get the stranger with the sick helmet and the unreal lightsaber abilities, and he's like genuinely really scary. There's so much to love about this show, and I really do hate the fact that it didn't get the time it needed to fully grow into what it was going to grow into. Of course, we don't know the full story about what it was going to grow into, but from the bits that we have heard about what was expected if there was going to be a season 2, we were going to get some or all of the stranger's backstory. We were going to get more of Vern. We were probably going to get her working with Yoda. We were going to get more of May and Osha's story. We would have got to see the Senate working to take over the Jedi. There was just so much to look forward to. And the fact that the show only got like 6 hours to prove that it was worthy of more time, I think was a real shame. I really, really, really hope that in some format we get more of this story. I would love it to be in live action. I would love to see another series, but at the very least, a book, an animated series, something to wrap this show up and bring all of these ideas into a complete circle, in my opinion at least, does feel very necessary. This is one of the only times in Star Wars where we have a full stop at something, and especially because the Acolyte is in this weird kind of nebulous space where there's not a lot 100 years behind it and there's not a lot 100 years ahead of it. It just feels like it needs more. It needs stuff around it to pad it out and help it breathe and function as a full narrative. And honestly, I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people kind of looked past with this show, is the fact that it truly was standing in its own space. A lot of casual Star Wars viewers had not and will not ever read The High Republic, be that the books or the comics or Young Jedi Adventures. So going into The Acolyte, this was the first time they had ever experienced the High Republic. Whereas with basically everything else in Star Wars, barring the first ever Star Wars release, there's always been something close by to kind of lean on, if that makes any sense. The prequels were leaning on the OG trilogy, the sequels were leaning on both of those, the Clone Wars were leaning on Attack of the Clones, so on and so forth. We always have these like buddies, but for the Acolyte, it was standing on its own, trying to hold its own ground. And I don't think that's necessarily a detriment, but I do think that these newer concepts for people, especially for the random viewer who only watches Star Wars when they see it pop up on their feed, it takes time for people to get acquainted with this new idea and try to figure out where exactly we are in a timeline. I know for a fact when I was first getting into Star Wars, I had no idea when anything was taking place. I was just kind of going off of of vibes. But all of that to say, I think this is a good show. I think it deserves a second chance, and I really, really hope that it gets it. I believe in this project so, so, so much, and I want nothing but the best for it and everyone that was involved in it. If it's not obvious, this is getting an S+ ranking from me. And that is going to wrap it up for this video. Next, we are getting into the prequels era. This is a pretty big chunk of time. This is going to include everything from the Dooku episodes of Tales of the Jedi all the way down to post Revenge of the Sith stuff. So we've got all of the Clone Wars to get through, pre and post Clone Wars to get through. There's so much stuff in this time period, and I'm so, so, so looking forward to it. If you want to be here for that journey, make sure you press the subscribe button down below. If you want to watch my short form videos as soon as they drop, I post those every single time I'm done with a book, a comic, and or a chunk of TV episodes, depending on what we're doing that day. My short form stuff will be linked below. It is both TikTok and Instagram, and if you feel so inclined, I would love to see you over there. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me, as this was a little ranty, but I did really want to try to get my thoughts out on this in a concise way, although I don't think I did a good job, but we'll see how it ends up looking after I edit. Thank you all so, so, so much for being here, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye! The only time I've ever experienced like true fear in Star Wars has been in Andor, but that's mostly because it's basically real life, and that in itself is very scary.